Hello and welcome to the Writecome.com podcast, where we help you to make money from your words. Each episode will be sharing tips, tricks, and strategies you can use to make more money from your writing, publishing, and marketing to your fans and audience. Let's get started with your host, Barry J. McDonald.
Hi, this is Barry here, and you are very, very welcome to this podcast episode from Writecome.com. And today's podcast episode is entitled, Whose Shoulders Are You Standing On? Now, if you've ever lit in the fire before, you are standing on the shoulders of the first caveman or cavewoman who came out of their cave and cracked two rocks together and got a spark going and got the very, very first campfire lit. So all of us are kind of standing on the shoulders of the people who've gone before us. And, well, why am I bringing up this topic in this podcast episode today? Well, in this podcast episode, I am going to give credit to people who have gone before me, who have laid a path and who have inspired me to get to the point where I am now. So I did hear Ben Settle, it was a long time ago, he had brought up, he had done a couple of podcast episodes on people who were experts that he'd followed, and he had dedicated some episodes to that. So I know this podcast episode isn't for everybody. You know, if maybe you want to skip on to the next one, you're welcome to do that. But I just thought I would take a few moments today just to give credit to the people who have gone before me and who have inspired me and who have made me the person that I am. Now, offline, there have been a lot of people who have inspired me and have made a big difference in my life, but I'm not going to talk about them in this episode. I am going to simply focus on the people who have made a big difference in my life. Now, the very first one is someone who you probably have heard me mention a couple of times, is Kevin Smith. Now, I don't care what your opinion is on Kevin Smith. I don't care whether you like him or you hate him or whatever, you hate his movies. For me, he was a big inspiration in my life. If you've been following me at all for long, you are probably well aware that one of my longest serving jobs was as a shelf stacker. I spent 12 years of my life stacking shelves, and when you're doing something as mundane as that, you do need something that's going to take you out of the job. Somewhere you can take your head somewhere else. So your body's doing the work, but your brain is somewhere else. And that is what I want to give credit to Kevin Smith for, in that I spent a lot of my hours of my time listening to podcasts that he had created. And what inspired me about his podcast was they were simply just conversations. Some of his podcasts were basically just kind of built loosely on the kind of idea of just sitting down with his friends, having a conversation that most of us have, but instead of it actually maybe not being recorded, he simply just set up a couple of microphones and it was recorded, and then the whole world could listen in on the conversation and, you know, follow along and be entertained by it. So for many an hour, I would listen to Kevin Smith's podcast and, again, being entertained sometimes about one of my favourite cartoon characters, which was Batman. He had a podcast on that. So I would listen to that podcast, not only for the entertainment factor, but he used to take experts in that on who had drawn past Batman comics and then who done the animated series and all that. So it was really, really kind of entertaining to listen to that. But one of the things I got from listening to him do the podcast was basically that idea that he'd said that basically a podcast can be simply a conversation just between a group of people that just you put a microphone down and you simply record on it. And as always, he would say again, over and over again, it was something that anybody could do. Anybody could switch on a microphone. Anybody could talk into a microphone. Now, I know he's got the gift of the gab, so it doesn't take him much to turn on a microphone and start working. But as he said, it was simply just talking into a microphone and, you know, entertaining people, just having conversations that we all love. For example, back to the Batman, you know, a lot of us had a love of Batman, so we'd simply go to that podcast and listen to it. But as he said, it was simply just turning on a microphone and it was something that anybody could do. And for the longest time, I used to listen to that podcast and I used to kind of nod along saying, yeah, that sounds great, but I couldn't actually do that. And it's only kind of in this past couple of years, that message has kind of sunk a little bit deeper. Maybe it's gone through some of the mental blocks that I had in my head, but it kind of pushed me on a course of, as he said in one of his podcasts, I think it was instead of how can I, you should change it to why can't I. And, you know, when you do go with a mindset like that, of why can't I do something that somebody else is doing, it does kind of free you up to do on things that you probably are at the moment probably blocking yourself from doing. So I want to give full credit to Kevin Smith for being the inspiration in kind of giving me that why can't I attitude instead of how can I. And that kind of pushed me forward. Now, someone else who had made a big difference in my life was Ben Settle. Now, if you don't know who Ben Settle is an internet marketer. If you do Google search, I'm sure you'll find loads of content content on Ben. And what I found inspiring about Ben was basically his workload. He was somebody who was religious, who was constantly being consistent every day. Now, one of the things that Ben is known for is his daily email. Now, I have been on Ben's email list, I can't remember how long. It could be maybe 4 or 5, it could be more years, but every day he comes out with another email. And, from reading his emails, I picked up a couple of bits of sales tips and marketing tips. And, it was just a kind of consistent message he had, that he was constantly showing up again and again and again. Didn't matter what day of the week it was, he always had a piece of content. And he always had, it's not like somebody would, send an email out to you saying bye, bye, bye. There was always kind of a marketing message in it. There was always a story. There was always something you could actually take away and you could actually use into your business. I know at the moment he probably is playing this kind of persona of being cantankerous and not being unhelpful and all those different things. But for the trail of content that he has left behind, not only in his emails, but also in his podcast, he gives away a ton of content. And if you do have a chance to listen to some of Ben's podcasts, I highly recommend you subscribe to them, because you will find a lot of great content in it. Marketing tips, sales tips, and just general kind of advice on how to turn around your business and how not to follow the herd and go off in your own direction. So I want to give full credit to Ben Settle for kind of, helping me kind of build that kind of mentality of showing up regularly, of constantly being there, of constantly trying to put my best content out there. And again, to some of the content he put out later on, for example, he used to do a lot of videos where he was simply walking along the beach with his dog, and he would take a video of either the dog or himself as he was walking along. But he used to give marketing tips away in those videos. And from those videos, that actually gave me the inspiration to do the walking podcast, when I used to walk around my own dog. And some of the earlier episodes of this podcast, if you do listen to it, you will hear me, you'll probably hear some nature in the background or whatever, or some kind of building noise going on. But that had come about from Ben's videos when he used to do his walking kind of talking videos. I turned that into my earlier episodes of the podcast. And I want to give Ben full credit for that, because it was a really, really great way of creating content and doing it at a time when you probably think you couldn't create content. As Ben says, you can be creating content at any time, simply a matter of just turning on your video or turning on your phone or just speaking into a microphone. You can create tons and tons of content, and I'd like to give Ben full credit for that. A lot of the content that I've created in the past has simply come about from me just having something in my hand that I can record. And even this podcast episode here, at the moment I am just sitting in a car park here after taking the dog for a walk around the local football field, and that was where I'm recording this podcast. So that kind of idea or mentality that Ben has, that you can record content anywhere. It doesn't have to be kind of studio quality. It doesn't have to be the best. As long as you give good content, give good advice, people will listen to it if it is good enough. So I want to give Ben full credit for that. And the last person I'd like to give full credit to is the great Dan Meredith. Now, if you don't know who Dan Meredith is, you are probably one of the very few at the moment. Dan is all over the web. Now, if you want to find out more about Dan, I highly recommend you go over to the Facebook group, which is called Coffee with Dan. Now, if you do go over there, compared to maybe some Facebook groups you have been to in the past, where maybe you might ask a question and maybe 1 or 2 people might answer if you're lucky, or it might just go through the news feed and nobody will pay any attention to it. You will find, if you do go over to Coffee with Dan and you do ask a question over there, the group over there is really, really responsive. They're really, really helpful. And you will find sometimes even the kind of dopiest question you might think you would ask, you will find a lot of people jumping on and helping you out. I've been helped there many, many times, especially on one time when I was really, really low and I was on the verge of just dragging it all in and giving all up. And I had simply put a post over there on the Facebook group. And in a matter of moments, I had a lot of great responses that kind of helped me pick me back up my feet and kind of dusted me down and sent me along on the journey that I'm on now. So I'll always be grateful to that group for doing that to me. So as I said, if you do want to find a great responsive group, so a group that are willing to help you out, I recommend you do go over to Coffee with Dan. Now, the great Dan Meredith, again, like Kevin Smith, has this mentality of, instead of how can I, why can't I want to give some of the stories that you will find about Dan are sometimes hard to believe, because he is somebody who will throw himself into something that he's never ever done before, just to see can he actually do it, or see if he can blag his way through it, or just see how far he can actually go on his own kind of whatever action he's taken just to see how far he can go. And then when he does find maybe that he needs a little bit of corrective, he probably will get some coaching there. But Dan is somebody who's an inspiration to us all, in that he throws himself into things that he shouldn't be probably doing. At one stage he had actually set up a coaching group when his group got popular, but instead of actually not doing maybe webinars or doing one-on-ones, Dan had the clever idea of taking everybody out in jet skis and doing his coaching on jet skis. So I don't know if there's ever been any kind of coaching that has ever been done sitting out in the sea, bobbing around in jet skis, but that is the type of person Dan is. Dan's motto is fun and profits. And again, that's one thing I do have taken from Dan, in that I am trying to make my business more kind of fun. Because a lot of us, unfortunately, we do kind of take it too seriously, and we do kind of, we don't kind of relax a bit. We don't kind of put more of ourselves into it, because we feel that we have to put on this fake kind of false persona, this kind of professionalism. But sometimes, as I said, people do like to kind of, build a bond with the person behind the business. And from watching Dan and watching how he just kind of plays around in the group, again, he does take his business seriously, but he doesn't take himself so seriously that, he's not going around with a kind of a rod stuck up his arse. He has, he is very, very kind of adventurous and things like that. So that is one of the things I want to give full credit to Dan for, is his fun and profits. It's something I have tried to take over to my own business and just kind of relax. And again, too, like Kevin Smith, he is somebody I highly respect for his kind of throwing himself into things that he probably shouldn't be doing. But again, like most of us, unfortunately, we do probably, if we wanted to maybe take up podcasting, or we want to take up fiction writing, we will probably study it for the longest time. We'll try to get every book on it, and we'll try to, be perfect before we actually put the pen to paper or switch on the microphone. Whereas Dan would just kind of switch on the microphone, record a couple of episodes, see how it goes, and then if he sees maybe that he's weak on this part or that part, well, then he will go and try and find coaching, or he's trying to find a book on that particular topic to bring him up to speed, then to strengthen his skill or whatever, or get fixed that weak part in his business. And that's what I like about him. He throws himself into things and then he corrects himself as he goes along, where the majority of us unfortunately go the opposite way. We try to study for weeks and months and try to get everything into our head before we actually start, whereas a lot of that knowledge is probably never going to be used, and we probably only need a fraction of it just to actually keep going. So those are the three people I recommend that you do kind of follow or check out. Again, I know maybe not all of them are for everybody, but again, the three people who have brought me to the point that I'm on now, the people's shoulders that I'm standing on right now, I want to give full credit to Kevin Smith, and again Ben Settle and Dan Meredith, for helping me get to the point that I'm at. So what was this podcast? Pardon me, my mouth's gone all dry here after all that talking. So basically what I did about this podcast was basically just to give credit to these people, and I want you maybe just to consider that in your own business. So if you're creating content today, be it a Facebook post or whatever, it's nice to reach out to, or just to give credit to other people that you have, stood on the shoulder for in the past, giving them some credit, because I know it's nice you probably don't, any experts now, it doesn't matter how big they are. I imagine Tony Robbins or whatever, I imagine that if somebody came up to him today and says, Tony, you have made a big difference in my life, I imagine that really, really does make his day. We probably think, well, some people are on such a huge pedestal that, they aren't kind of, in some way that a compliment doesn't affect them. But I'd imagine, those people who are on those pedestals do kind of relish the compliments. They do relish that their work or their business is making a difference in someone's life, because we all kind of go on this kind of up and down scale. I'm sure they have their bad days, and for them to get a compliment from somebody, that they have made a big difference in, it will make their day. So it is nice to just to kind of compliment those people, to reach out to them and let them know the difference they have made in your life. And again, just to show your fans or your followers that you haven't just kind of got out of a spaceship, that you haven't just fallen from earth and been, the expert that you are now. So by giving credit to other people, it does make kind of humanity. I'm not even going to say that word. It makes you more human. That's the word I'm looking for. It makes you more human, and doesn't make you seem like some artificial robot that's come from, the future, whatever, with all the knowledge in your head, that you've actually stood on the shoulders of someone. And again, too, as you probably heard me mention earlier on in one of the episodes about your breadcrumb content, this could be some breadcrumb content for your your Facebook page today or your blog or whatever by simply just trying to drop in those breadcrumbs of the experts that you have followed in the past to the point that you've got now. So at the moment my mouth is a bit dry and I probably am warbling on a little bit too long, so I'll end this podcast right now. But as always, if you like this podcast, if you'd like to find out more about me, or if you'd like to reach out to me, do a search for Writecome, WRITECOME.com. You'll find the content all over the web. And if you'd like to reach out to me, if you'd like to ask me a question or anything at all, feel free to do so. You can get me on barryjmcdonald@gmail.com. And as always, thanks for sharing your time again today. Take care. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
Thanks for joining us today. If you'd like more from the Writecome.com podcast, be sure to subscribe now for more tips, tricks, and ideas you can use to make more money from your words. See you in the next episode.